I'm Cheryl Waters. I'm down here in the KEXP studio with Priest. So happy to have you here at KEXP 90.3 FM in Seattle, streaming worldwide at kexp.org. Welcome back.
Thank you for having us.
The Seduction of Kansas. Absolutely excited about that new album, and you're going to play some songs from that today. Want to start us off with a couple and we'll chat?
Sounds good.
It's Priests live on KEXP.
Projected on me images. You used to cover me, the bright light that obscures my being. Ideas you projected on me images. You
That is Priests live here in the KEXP studios playing songs from the new album, The Seduction of Kansas. I absolutely love the new record, and there's so much intensity there. There's definitely a lot to think about in your lyrics. But I've read in interviews that you've said that you feel like this is really a playful and joyous record. And I definitely hear that in there, but I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Sure. This record's been a lot of things. I think it's confused people because it's not perhaps as immediate as our first record was. And it was written at a time where we were struggling to understand each other and get along. So oftentimes, the place where we could connect was in writing this music together and trying to fit all those pieces together. So there is an element of playfulness, I think, to it. And also, we're just a band of people who love to joke around, and be silly all the time. We like to just amuse ourselves. So I think probably some of that comes through as much as the darkness and the anger and the extreme characters that we wrote who are doing kind of like wild and crazy and potentially terrible things.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of dark humor in the album that, like, when you have nothing to lose, you're like, well, let's just do some crazy shit, and like that kind of sense of humor, I think, because I think it spawned a lot of musical invention and a lot of new sounds on the record, and then also kind of this dark, funny, but very funny, like when you're laughing in the face of death, kind of funny, like that thing. I feel like there's a lot of that vibe on the album, maybe.
You talk about the new record spawning a lot of new sounds, and I know you went down to Texas to work with John Congleton on this record, and he is just sort of universally beloved. People come in here time after time and talk about how much they love working with him. Just recently, Amanda Palmer was here and talking about not only how much she loved working with him, but how he pushed her and opened her eyes to a lot of creative ideas, but mostly made her feel like she could trust herself. So I'm curious how it was working with him, and what I hear it was sort of a lot of collaboration.
He was a real joy to work with. We kept very specific hours every day. We were like 11 to 6, and every day, like, we've definitely been in like studio situations, or like I've worked in studios where it's like, oh man, at the end of the day, I'm just beat. But by the end of the day, it's like, oh yeah, let's go to the movies, let's hang out. And he's such a proficient engineer that like he was able to help like translate ideas that we had in our head that we couldn't necessarily figure out on our own, and make it work,
It's kind of funny looking back on working with John. I remember like the first song we recorded with him was Texas Instruments, because we were like, this is like a really strong, good one. Like, we know it's good. And the first thing he's like, that kick pattern doesn't work. I think you need to change it. And I was like, okay. But now looking back, I was like, I wonder if he was like testing me to see if like, are they open to collaboration? And like, I was just like, yeah, okay. And I just changed it right there on the spot. But yeah, like, I think maybe in a weird way, like, with that first step, it set up a level of trust between us that, like, not only did we trust his opinion, but he was really willing to trust our opinions on things, too, Even times I think I was ready to, like, let a song go, just be like, this shouldn't be on the album, let's just stop recording it. Like, it's not working, let's just give up on it. And he'd be like, no, we're going to figure it out. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. It's always nice to have like a set of outside ears, because being in a band and being in vans for months and months, it's like kind of like a hyperbolic chamber where things are just bouncing around. And
oh, yeah.
It's good to get some fresh ears,
Did you do a lot of experimentation on this record that things you hadn't tried before?
Yeah, this was like, with everything else we've recorded, it's like stuff we toured on a lot before we went into the recording studio, and we hadn't played these songs live. So a lot of times we'd like, the first step when we were recording a song would be like, how does it go again? Like, let's all run over the song structure together to make sure we knew.
We had a giant notepad.
Yeah. And because that was the setup, I think it was like, when you played a song live a lot of times, you're like, this is the song. And if someone likes like, that's not, you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. But like with this, we were like, okay, like this is the song, but like, in a open kind of way, like, oh, let's get rid of the bridge here, or let's get rid of, let's take out the whole guitar on this verse, just like whatever. It was a lot of experimentation, no fear of changing things up. We changed a lot of songs in the studio as we did them, which is something we've never done before.
For me, in the past, I have felt sort of a self-imposed obligation a lot of times to write lyrics that seemed exactly what they were on the surface. And maybe that's some of the immediacy that people were connecting with the first record. But, life is not always that easy to grasp, and what you want to say doesn't always fit in a soundbite. So experimenting for me was just trying to lean into writing stuff that I didn't quite understand always, kind of writing these weird characters, and feeling the anxiety of knowing people are not always going to get this, and just sort of leaning into that and being but that's okay. One thing that we've talked about a lot with this album cycle is how much we all believe in the transformative power of art, both for individuals and for society. And a lot of times it feels like in this day and age, there's a lot of great conversations happening more often about social justice issues, which is amazing. But people, it seems, often want art and music and movies, whatever, to serve as an educational tool, which is cool, but I think is also indicative of the horrible public education system we have in this country, among other things, where it's we expect other forces in society to fulfill the role that system is not, whereas art should just sort of stir your consciousness and maybe feelings that you don't even fully understand. So it was very important for us to lean into that and to feel like we were pushing forward art that felt true to what we wanted to do rather than serving an easy function.
Your lyrics definitely speak to me, though. I think you have an amazing ability as a band to communicate your ideas sonically. And
Thank you, Cheryl. That means a lot.
Well, some of them do feel educational, but a lot of them feel fun. I mean, just that song, well, this is not fun per se, but that song, I'm Clean, really speaks to me. And,
It was really fun to write. It was Narnia references and
right.
Grace Kelly. I just had a lot of fun looking at all the media from my childhood and being what is with all these icy women? Let's poke on that a little bit.
Tell me where the title of the record comes from, The Seduction of Kansas.
It's a reference to a Tom Frank book called What's the Matter with Kansas. We discovered Tom Frank on tour a few years ago at a great record bookshop in Willimantic, Connecticut. He used to write for The Baffler. I think maybe still does on occasion. But this book, he wrote about his home state, just the history of the state of Kansas, how it's often been a breeding ground for really strong ideological directions, both to the left and the right. And it's funny because he published the book in the early 2000s, but I think a lot of what he's talking about speaks to our current climate today. His hypothesis is that if you look at what's happening in Kansas, a lot of times you can sort of see the ideological direction the entire country is going to move in. And he also just talks a lot about how the left has often perhaps forgotten the working class that initially the party or the movement was supposed to be founded to support. But the song itself and the reason why the title of the record is a little different is I just thought it would be fun to try to write some lyrics that felt like a short film, like a little movie. We are very inspired by movies. A lot of times when we write music, we kind of use those as reference points for how we want something to feel. So I was just thinking, how could I lyrically make a short film about Kansas?
Well, I absolutely love the new record. It's called The Seduction of Kansas. It's out on your own label, Sister Polygon Records.
That's right.
And I love how many great musical reference points you have as a band. Reading interviews with you, it's just super fun to hear all the different bands that you're name checking. And I know you have a song coming up, Control Freak, which you're going to play next. And tell me a little bit about where that was inspired by.
Believe it or not, very much musically inspired by the Prodigy song Firestarter, a classic. And we just love that song. So we were like, how do we try to bring that energy to a Priest song? It was one of the first songs that we started writing for this record. GL and I were just kind of messing around one day. This song in particular is one where I was like, how can I write just like a nasty, awful sounding character? And, how can we get the music to kind of bolster that feeling as well?
GL, you and Katie started talking at the same time when I asked that question. You want to add anything to that?
Katie nailed it.
All righty. Well, let's have it now. It's Priest live on KEXP.
Check. Danielle and I just switched, so bear with us, folks in Radio Land. Ready? Sorry.
Let's try this again.
All right, this song's called Jesus Said.
I know
That was awesome. Priests live on KEXP, the new album, The Seduction of Kansas. They're playing tonight at Neumos here in Seattle. So great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, Cheryl.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to you guys, crew in the studio.
Thanks to all of our wonderful listeners and supporters that make great sessions like this possible.
Yes.
You've got to tune to KEXP Seattle. Discover new music at listener-powered KEXP.org.